Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to our program on Kardec Radio.
Welcome to the Messengers in Our Home. Dear Kardec Radio listeners, welcome back to the Messengers in Our Home. Tonight with Chapter 46, Continuing to Learn. Hello, Mackenzie.
Hi, Francisca. Hello, dear friends. Welcome back to another chapter of the Messengers in Our Home.
And before we start, we would like to invite you for our opening prayer. Taking a moment to stop, connect to God, our Creator. Dear Mother, Father God, we thank you so much for being gathered in your name once more to continue to learn about life, about your laws, and how the interchange between the spiritual and physical plane happens. We thank you for all the blessings you receive, the learning opportunities, the challenges, and for all the support we receive along our way through good books, prayer, talks, the many ways consolation and help comes to us from both planes of life. We would like to welcome the good spirits as well, thanking them for their constant love and support, for inspiring us, for motivating us to continue on our path wherever we might be right now. Whether we're stuck, whether we fell down, whether we're just going on pretty well at the moment, they're always there. And when we connect to them, it's much easier for us to really feel and receive their support. And with your permission, we now would like to start our meeting. And so be it. So let's listen now to the reading of Chapter 46. Enjoy.
Chapter 46. Continuing to Learn. According to Aniceto, there was still more than an hour until the beginning of the Gospel lecture, which, for the incarnates in attendance, was Mr. Bentes' responsibility. However, the activity on the spirit plane had already become very intense. To the human eye, 35 flesh and blood persons were gathered there, but on our plane, the number of needy spirits was more than 200. Because the group was now augmented by several spirits who comprised the troublemaking entourage of the majority of the learners gathered there. A special area had been set aside for them. It seemed to me that it entailed increased security measures due to the fact that these spirits were there without the prior approval of the spirit guides working the public streets, but had been more or less obligated to come because they were connected to the ones who were intentionally seeking spiritual help. The activity was extensive, and there was little time for mere observation. All the workers of the house remained at their posts, paying the closest attention possible. I noticed that on one corner of the large table there were numerous requests for receituarios and assistance. A wide variety of names were listed there. Many people had asked for medical advice, guidance, assistance, and passes. 4 spirit physicians were hard at work, and assisting their humanitarian efforts, 40 direct workers were coming and going, collecting information and adding to details. We approached the large number of papers with names on them, and while I curiously examined them, Aniceto explained, "These are requests by people who say they are in need of immediate support and help." "Do they actually receive everything they ask for?" asked Vicente. "They receive what they need. Many ask for their bodies to be healed, but we have to consider to what extent this might be useful for them according to their individual desires. Others request guidance of various types, obliging us to balance our work so as not to hinder individual freedom. Earthly existence is an active spiritual preparation course, and there is almost never a lack of lazy students in the school who waste time instead of making the most of it, and who are anxious for false achievements that require the least amount of effort. That is why, in the area of guidance, the majority of the requests go unheeded. The request for therapy to maintain physical health by those who are actually interested in spiritual help is always justified. Nevertheless, as far as advice for daily living is concerned, we have to be very cautious regarding the requests of those who intentionally disregard the obligation of Christian conduct. The gospel is filled with sacred spiritual instructions, and disciples, at least before their own conscience, should consider themselves obliged to become familiar with them. Aniceto paused briefly and changed his tone of voice, as if to accentuate his words more strongly. "You may, of course, object and say that every question demands an answer and every request deserves a solution. However, in the case of answering certain requests, we must often resort to silence. How are we to recommend humility to those who preach it to others? How are we to teach patience to those who suggest it to others? And how are we to recommend the balm of work to those who are already able to condemn the laziness of others? Wouldn't that go against common sense? To read the rules of life to the blind and uneducated is a worthy task, but wouldn't repeating them to those who are already fully informed be underestimating the value of our time? Within the various denominations of Christianity, no soul receives news about Jesus for no apparent reason. So, if every edifying work condition expresses the individual's commitment, then all knowledge of Christ implies responsibility. All disciples of the Master, therefore, have the duty to examine their conscience and bestow upon it insights based on gospel precepts." Vicente listened with great interest and remarked, "Nevertheless, one should venture to remember the ones who frivolously make such requests." "Yes, but we should not copy their impulses. Discarnates and incarnates who still misuse the possibilities of an exchange between the visible and invisible spheres for the ordinary person will pay a high price for their carelessness." In that case, I asked respectfully, how are we to respond to requests for guidance? On rare occasions, we can provide verbal assistance in answer to certain requests if they merit it, and if the request happens to have a bearing on spiritual matters, and if we can do so. Nevertheless, it is almost always essential to answer nothing directly, but help them silently. This is simply because we don't have a lot of time to remind our incarnate brothers and sisters of certain duties that, for the sake of their own happiness, they should never fail to recall. Our kindly instructor was quiet for a few moments, and then, wishing to clear up any doubts, he continued. There are a lot of discarnate spirits who enjoy giving uninformed advice about various earthly situations and problems. But these poor friends get bogged down in secondary issues and are incapable of a higher vision regarding the infinite horizons of the eternal life. They make themselves into mere slaves of the lower mentalities incarnated on the earth. They forget that our immediate interest right now must be, above all others, whatever relates to higher spirituality. Our disturbed brothers and sisters who offer uninformed advice to lazy incarnate minds about matters regarding humankind's just and necessary responsibilities must do so at their own expense. What happens to them? Asked Vicente. Our mentor, however, replied with another question. What happens to responsible people when they decide to spend time on pointless activities? At that moment, one of the spirit clinicians approached and was amiably greeted by Aniceto, who said to him after introducing us, "Feel free to use our humble services. We are here as itinerant doctors ready for active duty." "Are you here from No Solar?" asked our new friend. "Yes, we are." "Oh, good. If possible, after the meeting, I would like your help with 2 urgent cases. One is a young woman who discarnated today, and the other is a dying man, my friend." "But of course," Aniceto replied solicitously. "We will await your instructions." Translator's note. The receituário is the practice in some Brazilian spiritist centers of prescribing psychographed homeopathic or herbal medicines through special mediums called receitistas. People come in, write down the name and address of the person or themselves, and the requests are then passed on to these mediums, who then psychograph, at the command of the good spirits in charge, the appropriate medicine for each case. And so tonight we are continuing to learn. That is, we are on chapter 46, entitled Continuing to Learn. And together with Aniceto, Andre, Vicente, and all those good spirits who are always striving to teach us how to perceive life in a better way, to look at life under this new light of the eternal life, we can learn with them how to behave better, how to improve ourselves, so that we can be co-creators of this beautiful universe. So tonight is chapter 46, and we are continuing at Dona Isabel's home together with our friends, right? Last week, we met 2 new people that were there, Dr. Fidelis and Mr. Bentes. And we saw that the amount of knowledge that we have, the earthly knowledge, is not always necessarily something that will make us progress spiritually, as we could gather from what Dr. Fidelis was trying to teach or trying to show Mr. Bentes. And Mr. Bentes was teaching Dr. Fidelis about a wider view of life instead of just being dictated by materiality. But we are here to continue to learn. And like we said last week, let's hope that we keep increasing our knowledge. Let's hope that we keep learning science, keep learning philosophy, keep learning all the material sciences. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it. It is, on the contrary, it is completely necessary for us to keep learning. And that's why we have this title of this chapter, Continuing to Learn. We need to keep learning. But we also need to learn some things that are not on the material world, that we are not just
a mere combination of cells, of physical cells, billions and billions, maybe trillions of cells in this body. So we are much more than that. We are a conscience. We are a spirit that are living in a material life for this short amount of time. And we have here Andre, Vicente, and Aniceto to show us a few more of these, of the consequences and of the responsibilities that we have while here incarnated, and also as well when we, one day, when we pass on to the spirit world, right? So let's continue on Donna Isabel's house with the meeting that they're going to have, but it's not starting yet. In the beginning of the chapter, Andre tells us that Aniceto informs us that there's still more than an hour until the beginning of the gospel lecture. Meaning, if you've been going to a Spiritist center, you know that, let's say, if the meeting starts at 7, naturally, we expect that the person who is responsible for that Spiritist center does not open the door at 7, right? We are hoping that at least half an hour before, if possible, or 15 minutes, I don't know, the amount of time that's necessary for people to arrive and start to organize everything to receive the people who will come are already there, right? So here, what Andre is telling us is that more than an hour until the beginning of the gospel lecture, there is already activity on the spirit plane, and not just a small amount of activity. He says that the activity on the spirit plane had already become very intense. So if we stop for a second here to think about it, even if there is no incarnates there at the Spiritist Center, more than an hour before the start and the material on our side, before the start of the meeting, there is already activity on the spirit plane to organize, to help those spirits who will come and who are already coming to be helped there. And if we just think for 1 second about this, isn't this something that we should think about when we are going to the Spiritist Center? Because if we are the ones, for example, who are responsible for the work that night at the Spiritist Center, it means that at the Spiritist Center there are already spirits. And if I am completely worried, and if I'm not connected, if I'm not striving to be connected to that work that night, what will the good spirits who are there need to do to me so that my mental work, my worries, so that these imbalances, they don't disturb the spiritual environment of the Spiritist Center before even getting there? So it is something for us to really think about it, and it's not for us to worry about it. See, I'm not telling anybody to worry about it, because to worry is just to increase that mental imbalance, right? But it's to think about it, and to maybe on our day, the day that I'm going to the Spiritist Center, if I'm the responsible for it, right? If I'm the person one of the people who will, I don't know, maybe give the passes, maybe give the lecture, even if I'm just going there for, I don't know, just for carrying the water to those who will drink it. It doesn't matter the activity. All the activities we should be focused on the spiritual side as well as on the material side of that activity, so that when we get to the Spiritist Center, we already start to help the environment and to help those spirits who are already there, active, and not only active, but very intense, and more than an hour before the activity begins. So it is very interesting for us to look at the spiritual side of the work at the Spiritist Center that I go to. And on that matter, we can clearly see that this is not just for a Spiritist Center. When we are talking here about the Spiritist Center, and I think we made this clear already, but I think it's worthwhile reminding ourselves of this, that this is true for basically any place of worship, be it anywhere it is. Let's say a small chapel inside a hospital, for example. That place is sacred in the best sense of the word sacred, right? It's a place where people will go for connecting to God. There needs to be a certain type of attitude there, right? It's not that it should be a sad place. No, it's the opposite. It should be a happy place, but a happy without all the noises and all the things that can help disturb the surroundings, right? So it is interesting for us to think about the spirit world and the spiritual side of these places, and how are we helping the good spirits there to plan and to make the work that they need to do at that specific place. So Andre goes on and says, well, this is on the spiritual side. On the physical side, we have around there 35 flesh and blood people, right? 35 flesh and blood persons. On the spiritual side, there's more than 200. So again, it is for us to think about this is something that it's not something that usually comes to our mind. So if we go, let's say, by the same proportion here, 35 to more than 200, right? So this is what, 5 times, 6 times. So it means that if I have only like 3, 4, 5 people at the Spiritist Center, we have at least 30 people, 30 spirits around, and even, maybe even more, right? So we are never alone at a Spiritist Center. We're never alone at a church. We're never alone at a temple. It's always, there's always this huge audience there, not only to receive help, but also to help us help the others. So it is very important for us to think about this. But why there are these 200? Naturally, some of them are the ones who will help, and some of them are the ones who are coming with those who want help, right? So let's say there are 10 people who are coming to watch the meeting and will receive the passes and so on. They are like us, one who need and one who probably have awakened in searching help, right? In searching spiritual help. So there are spirits connected to us, right? And maybe some who want to disturb us, just the way we sometimes disturb them. And there are some who are our friends. And so they come if they can come, and some of them will not be able not to come because we're going. So there's this huge amount of spirits there. And the spiritual side of the Spiritist Center needs to organize all these spirits and what they're doing, where they will stay, where they will be able to hear and to listen and to be helped, and so on. So the activities there on the spiritual side is even more intense than the activities that we have when we are working there at the Spiritist Center on our material side. Right, so everybody was there, everybody at their posts, everybody doing what they needed to do, and there's this word here in that they didn't translate because there's no right expression to translate it, and so they used the same word, the word in Portuguese for it, which is receituário, right? And what is a receituário? We already covered this a while ago. And on the reading, the translator wrote a note about it. So the receituário is a practice where a person comes to the Spiritist Center, and then there's this book. You write the name of the person who you want to receive a message for, or you want to receive like an advice or maybe a medicine of some degree to that person or for yourself, right? So you say that, oh no, I'm writing my name and I'm going to be here tonight. So the spirits won't need to go to my house to look at me and see what I need. Or you can put the name of the person that there at the book and put the address where that person will be at the time of that meeting. And what happens is the good spirits who are responsible for that activity, together with the medium who is also responsible for that activity, will together visit the person, visit the spirit, and see what they can do, if they can do something, if they can provide any advice, or if they can provide like a herbal medicine or a suggestion on a type of food or something like that, not to replace any other advice from an expert doctor on the problem that the person is having at that specific moment. So this is more or less what the Receituário is. And there is, André is describing to us, there is a lot of people writing names on that book, and what they wrote there is that they ask for medical advice, guidance, assistance, and passes. And he says 4 spirit physicians were hard at work. So see, there's the people on the material side, and there's people and spirits on the spiritual side helping this. In this specific case, there were 4 spirit physicians hard at work, meaning that they need to really put the effort to try to help these people who put their names there. And this here comes with this comes our first observation about this. So let's imagine that you have 4 physicians, right? And you have like, I don't know, let's say 40 names there. You will need 10 visits per physician, right? And how can we visit 10 people in an hour and a half, if they are sometimes very, very far away? And it's not just go and return, right? There will be, maybe people will say, oh, it's the spirit, right? So they will go and return very fast. So let's say they don't spend any time visiting the person that needs help. And what about the time to examine the person, right? So how much time do we need to examine what the person needs? So what we need to think, and what I want to think about here, is, do we really need, and now I'm talking to us, right? The ones who put our names at those books. Do we really need to put the names there? Do we think about it, right? The work that we are giving to others, right? The amount of trouble sometimes that we're adding to those spirits. And please understand that I'm not saying that we should not put our names. No, it's on the contrary. If we need to put the names, if we really need some help, there's absolutely no problem, and we should go and put our names. But before putting our names, putting other people's names, and I'm saying this right now because that's what, and we already read the chapter, we already heard the reading of the chapter, so we know what Aniceto will say about this. But do we really need? Don't we already know what the spirits can say about what I'm asking, right? So what am I expecting? Am I expecting just to receive a miracle answer so that everything will be solved just by some miracle words, like a magic wand that will solve all problems? So we need to understand that these are spirits who are really, really working to help others. So the more names we put that really don't need to be there, the more we are giving work for them that they could be using that time to do something else to those who really need help. So if they really need help, put their names there. If they don't really need the help at that specific time, leave it for another day. Leave it for a different possibility, right? Do something different than just put the name there. But let's go on, because Vicente and Andre and Aniceto will ask questions, and Aniceto will answer some questions for us that will give us more food for thought on that matter. Lots of requests, just like I was saying, and Vicente asks, right? Do they actually receive everything they ask for? Our question now, instead of Vicente's, which is a question that sometimes we hear people asking at the Spiritist Center, at a church, or, oh, I started to go to the church, I started to go to the Spiritist Center, and I'm still having so many problems. Why? We can ask this, right? If you ask your father when you're a kid to eat only chocolate, will your father allow you to eat only chocolate? Of course we will not receive everything that we ask for, but it's something that we sometimes forget, right? We ask, and then we don't receive, and then we complain that we don't receive. Do we know what we are asking for? That's the question we should be asking ourselves. And that's how Aniceto starts his answer. They receive what they need. Again, they receive what they need. Do we receive everything? If we don't need it, we will not receive it. And by need here, we could go on and on and on with what this word need means. We know what the word need means, right? So we don't have to go on. Sometimes we don't even know that we need it, but when we have it, it will make our lives much, much better. And by much better, I'm not saying materially better, but spiritually better. And that's what this word need means here at this specific moment. And then he goes on and gives us a lot of examples about it, right? A lot of people ask for their bodies to be healed, but will it be useful for them? How many people lost their limbs, are having lots of trouble, health problems, and only after some time living with those problems, they realize how wrongfully they have been acting in their lives. Haven't this sink in yet on us? Have we gone through some changes like that? I'm remembering 2,000 years ago the book by Chico Xavier and Emmanuel, and there's something happens there, and there's one of the characters who is a friend of Publius Lentulus, and he says that after fighting a long time with his disease, is that he came to realize how wrong he was with some beliefs that he had. And isn't this true to all of us, right? How many people have cancer, and then they completely change their lives, their way of living, their way of seeing life, of living better with their peers, with their friends, with their families. And we keep asking for to be healed. Will it be useful for us? That's the big question. It can be useful. I'm not saying that we should, we want, spiritists, they all want to be sick. No, we want to be healthy, but healthy in everything, not only in our bodies, with a healthy mind, with a healthy spirit, and also with a healthy body. But sometimes, unfortunately, we don't know how to deal with our bodies being completely free of any kind of diseases, of any kind of illnesses. Apparently, we're still in need of those types of problems. It will be great, and hopefully it already is great with you if you're healthy and you keep seeking spiritual improvement, not only material improvement, that's awesome, and that's what we strive for. But to some of us, unfortunately, this is still not true. But he goes on and he says, oh, it's not only about the body. Let's say some people request guidance of various types, but we need to know if, depending on the guidance that we provide, it will not remove their individual freedom, because we need to know, we need to learn how to choose, what to choose, because we will be the responsible ones for our choices. Independently of what another person tells me, I will be the responsible for my choices. So let's say you just got your driver's license, right? And then the teacher tells you that you cannot do certain things, whatever it is. A person with the license for that's been driving for a long time doesn't need to do that. But a person that just got their permit, just got their license, they can't do it because they're still in the process of learning. And if you do it because somebody asked you to do something that you shouldn't be doing, what if the officer stops you and sees you doing the wrong thing? What will you say to the officer? Oh no, I only did this because my friend or my parent or my brother or asked me to do it. What will the officer say? Say, oh, so bring that person, so I will give the ticket to that person, and I'll take the permit from the other person, not from you? That's not what's going to happen. It doesn't matter who told you to do it. What matters is who did it. So if a spirit comes and gives us a certain type of advice and we do it, it doesn't take the responsibility out of my hands. I was the one who did it, right? So that's what Aniceto is explaining to us. We want to blame everybody else, and that's what he says. Oh, doesn't use his words, but he says there is almost never a lack of lazy students in the school who waste time instead of making the most of it. We want to blame. We want to not work and then receive the money, right? Receive the wage at the end of the month, at the end of the week of that work that I was never able to do it because I chose not to do it. Who will? And that's what Aniceto is inviting us to think about it, right? We are anxious for false achievements that require the least amount of effort, and it's not how life works, right? If I want to learn, if I want to improve, I need to put the work and put the effort to do it, to learn, to go ahead and try and really make it. That's why, he says, in the area of guidance, the majority of the requests go unheeded, because we are not ready to work for it. We are not working to get it. We just want a magic, like I said, a magic wand to solve the problems. No, it's not how it works. That's not how it works. He says at the end of the same paragraph, and I'm going to quote because this is really, really, really important for us to think about it. He says, as far as advice for daily living is concerned, we have to be very cautious regarding the requests of those who intentionally disregard the obligation of Christian conduct. And he goes on, the gospel is filled with sacred spiritual instructions, and disciples, at least before their own conscience, should consider themselves obliged to become familiar with them. So, what Aniceto is inviting us to do here is that we have the advices already. We already know the advices. We are already reading the messengers, for example. We already read No Solar. And these are only 2 books. If we are following any kind of religion, we have so many different types of good advices. And not only advices, good and sacred spiritual instructions to behave better, to become a better person. So we have a lot of good people already trying to teach us and show us how to do it. And we keep asking for daily advice. Why? We should be obliged. We should consider, like he says, ourselves obliged to become familiar with them. Obliged by myself, not by somebody else, not by me who is saying this, not by Aniceto who is telling me this. No, obliged by myself, by my conscience of reading this and say, hey, I already know this. I already read this. What am I doing with this knowledge that I acquired? But Aniceto goes on. He changes his tone of voice just to make the point more clear. And he says, of course, maybe you're thinking, well, but everybody, if a person is asking a question, we need to provide them to an answer, right? And he says, well, sometimes we need to be silent, look at them, and then say, hey, what can I tell you more than what I just told you? And then he goes on and asks a few questions here. When I read this, a smile pops up in my face, because how, and I'm going to read because I think it's really interesting for us to read this and to think about it, right? How are we to recommend humility to those who preach it to others? So the person is preaching humility to other people. How and why should I need to recommend humility to them? A person is teaching about patience. Why am I going to teach them again about patience if they are the ones who are suggesting it to other people? And if a person is saying that there are other people who are lazy, it means that the person who is saying that others are lazy is because probably the person works a lot. And how can I go and suggest work for that person? So wouldn't that go against common sense? That's what Aniceto asks us. So some people who ask advice, it's just as if they don't know what they're asking, or they are doing stuff and they are not even thinking about it, right? They're not even thinking about why they are speaking, why and what they are telling others. And let's say if you have a person who really needs help at the hospital and comes another person, let's say a person has a deep cut in the leg or in the arm, and then comes a person with a small needle at his fingertip, who needs more help? Wouldn't it be against common sense to treat first the person with the needle, then the one who really needs to stop that bleeding from that serious and deep cut in their body? So what is the value of the time of those who are helping us? And that's why I started by asking us to think about putting names of other people to request for help. We need to really think about it and say, does that person really need help right now? Right? When will be the best time for them to need help? Let's imagine going to a Spirit Center, right? And then there's only one person that gives us the passes, and then there's a line of 20 people already. Can you imagine the effort that person who's given the passes will need to go through to cover all the 20 people? Even if it's 2 people giving passes, and there will be 10 people to receive passes. What should be my point of view looking at this, right? Do I really need to be on that line today, right? Do I really need the passes? If I need the passes, that's perfectly fine. Go to the line and take the passes. They are there to help. But if I can help them, if we can help the person who will give the passes, shouldn't I be thinking about helping them as well? And how can I help the person who is giving the passes? First, thinking about them, making a prayer to them, so that the good spirits can provide them with more energy to give the passes to those who are in need. And asking myself, do I need to take the passes today? Do I really need it? If I need it, go, and please go, pray, and receive the energy from the person who is given the passes. But if you don't need the passes, just don't go. Think about the good spirits, ask them to help you, and ask them to help the person who is given the passes. Because this will be a big help to the spirits who will understand that when you go, it's because you really think you need, and not just because you're following a line, not knowing what you're doing, not knowing what you're receiving, not knowing what we are doing, not knowing what we are receiving. So, do we know what we are asking for? Right? Oh, I need some help with my marriage, with my friends, with the way that stuff is happening in my work, and my boss, and the person that already, let's say, talks, about the gospel, and talks about humility, talks about patience, talks about loving one another. And what will a good spirit say to a person that already gives lectures on the gospel? I think that the only good advice is practice what you preach, right? It's interesting for us to stop just for a little second to think about this, and how sometimes we forget this simple advice, right? Practice what you preach, right? We all know. Maybe you're thinking now, but this is hard, Mackenzie. And I would say, yes, it is hard. I'm not saying that it is easy. What I'm saying is we need to really put the effort of perceiving this, of really taking hold of it, not only with our minds, but with our hearts, right? Spiritually taking hold of it so that we understand it deeply and that we live the message, right? And Aniceto finalizes this idea here by inviting us to think about something, to keep going thinking about this using Jesus now, which is a powerful example. He says, now I'll quote up to the end of this chapter, to the end of this paragraph. He says, within the various denominations of Christianity, no soul receives news about Jesus for no apparent reason. Here he's talking about news about Jesus is news about the knowledge of his message, about knowing the teachings. He goes on. So, if every edifying work condition expresses the individual's commitment, so if I am there at this Spiritus Center, at the church, at the temple, whatever edifying work condition, and it doesn't necessarily mean in a sacred temple, it can be in our work, it can be at our job, it can be where I'm studying right now in school, with my teacher, with my friends, with my peers. If I have that work there, this needs to represent our commitment, right? Our individual commitment to that work. So if every edifying work condition expresses our commitment, then all knowledge of Christ implies responsibility. Everything that we already learned so far implies a deep responsibility with the knowledge that I just acquired. And even more specifically, the knowledge of Christ, or meaning the knowledge of the teachings of the Christ, the knowledge of the lesson, of the good news that Jesus brought to us. But he goes on to explain even deeper. All disciples of the Master, therefore, have the duty to examine their conscience and bestow upon it insights based on gospel precepts. I'm going to translate it. Well, I'm not the best one to translate from English, but I mean, the idea that he wants us to understand here is that if we are disciples of the Master, if we are already following or striving or making the effort to follow Jesus' teachings, we have the duty to examine our conscience, to think about our behaviors, to think about what am I thinking, to think about what am I feeling, meaning know thyself, know yourself, to examine myself. And then, after I examine my conscience, I should give my conscience a gift. That's this bestow upon it. Give myself a gift. What is this gift that I should give myself? Insights. Based on what? On the teachings of the gospel. So I should open my mind, take those teachings that I'm already receiving from the Father, from the preacher, from the Dalai Lama, from an old book that I found with very good teachings, from the Gospel According to Spiritism, from this book, The Messengers, wherever I can find these gospel precepts of loving one another, of forgiveness, of charity, of humility, of patience, and take insights, have insights on those teachings, and give the gift of those insights to myself, to bestow upon me, upon my conscience, the gift of insights based on the gospel precepts. That's what Aniceto is inviting us to do, is to give ourselves the best gift that we should receive from ourselves, to understand the gospel, and after understanding it, practice it in our daily lives. What else can we do? What else can we say, right? This is all what Aniceto is teaching us. But Vicente, just like ourselves, right, is a spirit like ourselves. And he looks and say, hey, I understand what you're saying, but I still think that we should remind everyone about what you just told me, and remind everyone that they should not be asking this. That's what he says, right? Nevertheless, one should venture to remember the ones who frivolously make such requests. So what Vicente is saying here, okay, I understand what you're saying. So maybe that's what we should tell them, right? Instead of recommending humility to those who are already talking about humility, or recommending patience to those who are preaching about patience, we should just go to them and say, hey, you should remember this. You should remember that you already know about humility, and maybe you should just follow your own advice. To what Aniceto responds, and I laugh about this as well, and he says, yeah, maybe you're right, but we should not copy their impulses, because that's what they're doing. They are trying to remind everyone of what everyone should do. Should we do the same to them? We should not copy their impulses. And he gives us another big advice. If we misuse the possibilities of an exchange between the visible and the invisible spheres, we will pay a high price for our carelessness, for using the time, for using this communication in a way that we should not be using it for. I stopped a little bit here just for us to think about this. I'm not going to make any more comments about it, because I think that everything that Aniceto said responds for itself at this specific moment. Andre comes and say, hey, so how are we to respond to requests for guidance? After everything that you said, so what should we do then? Should we not do anything? Should we answer? Should we not answer? What is our duty here then? And he says that, well, just like everything else, we need to find the balance, right? We need to understand if the person is really wants the answer, really needs to have an answer, right? And that's how it goes. And that's what Aniceto says. On rare occasions, the spirits will provide verbal assistance if they merit, and if that request happens to have a bearing on spiritual matters. But also if they can do so, because they need to have the permission of a spirit who is a higher order spirit, who will be able to see if the answer that the person is asking needs to be given at that specific time. If not, it's almost always, this is what Aniceto says, it is almost always essential to answer nothing directly, but help them silently. Because for the sake of our own happiness, and I'm quoting here, I'm paraphrasing him here, for the sake of our own happiness, we should never fail to recall, we should never fail to remember the duties that I have, the duties that we have. Nobody should need to be reminding me of the duties that I have. I am a father, I am a mother, I am a sister, I am a brother, I am a boss. We, based on what I'm living now, based on what we are living at this specific moment, we have duties. Nobody should be reminding us of those duties at all times. It's not their duty to remind me of that. It is my duty to do what I need to do. So if we keep doing it, we're just taking from the other, or they are just taking from me, my responsibility. And that's my responsibility. It's not theirs. That's why the good spirits, once we ask, maybe they will respond silently, helping us the way they can, but not doing it for us. That's what Aniceto tells us. He quiets down for a little bit, and then just to finish and to clear up any doubts, he continues and tells us that most of the problems, unfortunately, that we or other people go look for solutions in a spiritist center, in a church, in a temple, with friends, is solution for their earthly situations and problems, for our earthly situations and problems. But some of us are incapable of seeing, of having a better vision regarding our life as a whole. Not as a material body, but as a spirit. We connect to the minds of those spirits who are still connected to material life. And he's talking about the discarnates and the incarnates, naturally. We become slaves of this whole mentality of living just what we can see, of living just what we can touch, and we forget. And I'm going to read again, quoting him, quoting Aniceto here. We forget that our immediate interest right now must be, above all others, whatever relates to higher spirituality. End quote. That's what we need to understand. Once again, and I think I've said this so many times during these conversations here, it's not that we should not worry about our material life. Of course, we need to worry about it. We need to worry about our health, physical health. We need to worry about our work. We need to work to get money to survive, right? To have a house, to pay for the doctors, food, to have fun. Right? We need this. There's nothing, absolutely nothing wrong with it. But what about thinking about ourselves as spirits? How much are we really thinking about ourselves as spirits? So if we are going to Spiritist Center just to get advice on material things, we will find answer to those. Sometimes in silence, sometimes depending on who is giving us the advice, it will be spirits who are connected to those types of advices, not connected to higher spirituality. And that's what Aniceto analyzes and tells us here. He says, quote, "Our disturbed brothers and sisters who offer uninformed advice to lazy incarnate minds about matter regarding humankind's just and necessary responsibilities must do so at their own expense." So if there are spirits who are giving us uninformed advice regarding matters of our necessary responsibilities, of what we should already be doing physically, they're not being always helped by the great spirits that are connected to higher spirituality. They are spirits just like ourselves, blinds guiding blinds. Vicente looks at him, looks at Aniceto, just like ourselves, and asks, what happens to those? What happens to them? Aniceto replies with another question, which will close our chapter basically with the question. He says, what happens to responsible people when they decide to spend time on pointless activities? What happens to a student who needs to be present at school and is just using their phones all the time, not paying attention to school? What happens to that person? What happens to a doctor who has a patient right in front of him or her and is living a daydream of the next vacation? One time, it will happen that this will be bad for them at one point. Something will happen that will not make them very happy, and probably will, independently of what is my responsibility, destroy or complicate other people's lives. And I will be seen as a person that is not ready for that activity, is not as responsible as other people would think of me. What does it have to do with me? Hopefully, I'm not a lazy incarnate mind who keeps asking for guidance for all the basic things that I should already be doing. On the other hand, try to be more responsible and do what I need to do to reach the best that we can give in our lives. Just like Aniceto, Vicente, and Andre at the end of this chapter. They are talking, they are learning, but then comes a person, comes a spirit, and look at them, say, hey, you guys are from Nosso Lar, aren't you? And yes, we are. Say, oh, good. I need some help from you. Aniceto says, yeah, of course, we will await your instructions because we are ready for active duty. We are ready. We need to be ready for active duty at all times. Not for our work, because we are basically, we are lazy sometimes, but we are always ready for active duty, right? If my boss needs, if I need the money, I will do it. What will I do if I need the spiritual currency for my own eternal life? Am I ready for duty to give the best of me to this world that gives me everything that I have, that gives me my life, that gives me my family, that gives me my loved ones? Let's be always ready for duty. Let's be always ready to give love back to this beautiful and wonderful universe. I hope you stay with us, because next week we will be back with another chapter of the messengers in our home, ready for active duty. Have a great week, everyone. See you next time.
Thank you for listening to Kardec Radio, broadcasting live every Saturday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Email us and share your comments at www.kardecradio.com. Until next time, we wish you many blessings.